Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. And welcome back to the first official bonus episode of Season 3. This week, Season 3 premiered, Season 3 debuted, and not only do we have 2 episodes to kick off Season 3, but we also have 2 video episodes to kick off Season 3, which, don't get me wrong, I was very tempted to record this particular episode on GarageBand and revert to my old ways because there is a little bit more convenience to doing it that way. And then I said to myself, you know what? No, Season 3, I said it was going to be different. We're doing more video episodes. So here we are, Season 3, video episode, and I'm happy to be here. We are recovering today from a snowy weekend. If you are in the Northeast or anywhere east in the country, honestly, you got some form of precipitation this week. Or today, rather, today. And it was a lot of snow. Yesterday was just hunkering down. I actually got so much done. I was very productive yesterday, so I'm very happy to have had that time. Obviously, I know that there's a lot of people maybe more south of me that got more rain, more freezing rain, and that obviously presents its own challenges. So I'm sorry if you are in that area. I hope all is well. I hope power has restored, and I hope that you are warm and that you are okay. That is my hope. We are just making our way out of the chaos that was yesterday. I think accumulation was about a foot, maybe a bit more. And Tally and I just had ourselves a day yesterday, and now we are back to reality. But I did clean out my pantry. I cleaned out my fridge. I got a lot of work done. I cleaned. So lots of productivity was had yesterday. And I also got to relax, which was also nice. I got to watch a show that I haven't gotten to catch up on. I got to read a little bit. I got to kind of chill. So it was a healthy balance of both productivity and then also laying low, which I think is exactly how a snow day should be. So for today's episode, we were going to do a family dinner episode, but I thought let's kick off Season 3 with some tough love. Some of you need to hear this today. I know it, and I'm ready to lay it out for you. Next week, we will have a family dinner episode. But today, we're going to dive into, if I wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings, this is what I would say. And I see this trend on TikTok, and I really like it because I think it allows us to just be real. I think too often we sugarcoat, too often we beat around the bush. We give ourselves too much grace. We give ourselves too much of a excuse or get out of jail free card. And I do believe, I'll preface all of this by saying that grace is important. Patience is important. Self-compassion is important. Giving yourself the space to be okay with choices that you made or the ebbs and flows of a wellness journey. But sometimes I think it does require us to crack down on ourselves a little bit more and hold ourselves accountable to what we want. Because if we give ourselves too much excuses or too much grace or too much self-forgiveness or too much patience, then we don't get anywhere. Then we don't make progress. Then we just kind of stall and maybe tread water and kind of just stay in one space. And that's not what we want. We want to grow. We want to expand. We want to move forward. And so we have to be willing to say, yeah, I can be patient and show myself the grace that I need to take care of myself. And also I can be disciplined. I can focus on the goal and I can get to where I want to be with a healthy mixture of both. So that is what we're going to be exploring today. Lots to this conversation, lots to dive in. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the table and let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So, welcome back. Let's set the scene a little bit. I have a matcha with me. I've been adding some colostrum to my matcha. And this is my new favorite mug. My sweet niece, Lennon, she's 4 years old, 4.5 now. She made this for me. It says, Aunt Emmy, love Lennon. And she said that this is me and her. This is a treat. And this is Tally. Clearly, that's Tally. Obviously. I have an extra large water with me. I'm in my comfy cozies and we are getting to it. So let's dive in to, if I wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings, what would I say to you? So the first thing I would say is your body is not broken. Your body's not broken. It is simply responding to the inputs that you're giving it. Your body is not broken. Your body is simply responding to the inputs that you're giving it. Now, what does this mean? I think we get so caught up in being resentful or angry or feeling let down by our bodies, which I think to some extent you are valid in feeling what you're feeling in that arena, right? You can feel frustrated. You can feel aggravated. You can feel let down. You can feel like your body's broken. But what I want you to also be sure that you're spending time doing is exploring, well, what are the inputs that I'm giving it that may explain why I feel this way? And what I mean by that is I think we forget how much of an influence the environment has on our bodies, or we're just not taught that that is the case. Now, we're told, eat healthy, be sure you're moving, be sure you're sleeping. But what I don't think people recognize is how it is a collection of all the inputs, the stress, the drinking, the processed foods, the sedentary living, and so forth, that actually makes the greatest impact on your body and on your health. And if you are not providing the body with the necessary inputs for it to do its job the way that we want it to, what do we expect our body's going to do? Our body is not broken. Our body is just not getting the resources and the support that it needs to do the job that you are expecting it to do. And so with that said, this is a whole different way to view the way you're living your life, is understanding that it's not that the body doesn't want to do it. The body is wired to heal. The body wants to heal. The body wants to remain balanced. The body wants to function well for the sake of your survival. But at this point in time, the inputs of your environment are compromising your body's ability to do that. It's compromising your body's homeostasis. It is preventing the body from doing the job that it's meant to do efficiently, adequately. And that restoration is not possible without addressing the inputs. So, a little bit of a reframe here. It's not that your body is broken. Your body is malfunctioning based on the environment that it lives within. And it's up to you to evaluate those inputs and then make changes accordingly. Secondly, healing takes time. So this might be obvious. It might not be obvious to all. So I want to remind you first and foremost that healing takes time. But also, healing is going to take time based on the fact that damage was done over the course of time. I go over this a ton with my one client. She's in her 60s, and we have been working for almost 2 years now on so many different areas of her health. And when she gets frustrated, when she gets upset maybe or discouraged about where she's at and the progress and the pace at which the healing is taking place, I, of course, will validate that because that's very fair. Of course, it's frustrating. Of course, when you're putting in a lot of work and maybe you're not seeing that output, it can feel discouraging. It can feel really disheartening. But then I also remind her, this is decades and decades and decades of dysfunction that has led her to where she is now. Now, is that to say it's going to take decades and decades and decades for her to heal? No, definitely not. But what we have to remember is this is years of accumulated stress that the body has undergone and now has compensated for. And so in order to restore the body's function, it is also going to take time. And I think that's something that we have lost touch with. We forget that. Of course, we forget that. But also what we have been conditioned to believe is that healing should be quick, Because think about it, in our culture, in our medical system, you take a medication for a couple days and you're better. You break an arm, takes a couple weeks, and then you're better, right? And when you think about it, that is kind of what we've been led to believe is normal. But when we really consider the process of healing and true restoration, it is likely going to take longer. And being okay with that and accepting that at the forefront is a part of the journey. Because the more that we stress and we fixate and we become frustrated and we become wrapped up in all this negative emotion about why isn't it helping? Why isn't it changing? Why are things not moving along? That is going to impede your process as well. It's going to impede your progress as well. Remember, healing takes time. The damage that was done did not happen in the course of a couple weeks, a couple months. We didn't wake up suddenly with a leaky gut. You didn't wake up suddenly with a hormonal imbalance. This is time that the body is now undergoing stress. Those inputs are stressing the body, placing demand on the body, placing burden on the body. And then as a result of that, symptoms start to appear. Usually, this is not commonly talked about, usually symptoms are the last to show up once the dysfunction is taking place. Usually symptoms are not something that's showing up right away. Usually symptoms actually take place later on. And then diagnosis, of course, doesn't happen well down the road. And even if symptoms are appearing, doesn't necessarily mean that diagnosis is even possible, because we know that not everything is diagnosable. Sometimes it's just those subclinical symptoms that really don't manifest into diagnosis, and that's why most people are dismissed as a result of them. So just remember that the symptoms are just your body's way of communicating with you that there's something wrong. But when those start to show up, that can sometimes be months, years down the line. So really important to remember that. Next, stop ignoring the foundations. Stop ignoring the foundations. I think that this is a chronic issue that I see both in my clientele, I see on social media, I see across the board, where we think that there's any one thing. We'll start with this, and then we'll move into more expansion on the foundation conversation. We think that there is one supplement or one cure-all to all of our issues. I can't tell you how many messages and how many comments I get around, I'm thinking I'm going to bring this in for X, Y, and Z issues. What do you think? Or I think I'm going to try this and see how it goes, see how I feel. But we're not focused on the foundations first. I think what I see most commonly with this is individuals who are bringing in supplements. And I say supplements, but this is not just supplements. I mean, this expands to all sorts of wellness, even the biohacking that I see nowadays, that people are bringing in sauna and red light and all of these wonderful things, which I love. Don't get me wrong. I love these things. But if the foundations are not sound, if you're drinking excessively, if you're eating lots of fried foods, if you are not moving your body regularly, or it's just intermittent, or you are not sleeping well, or your sleep schedule's really irregular, all of these important foundational tools are going to be what moves the needle beyond anything that a red light or a supplement can do. That is the hard truth. And so to me, and I'll be completely honest with you, it is a waste of your money and your time to focus on these higher order investments, we'll say. So the saunas, the cryotherapies, the cold plunges, the greens powders, the red lights, the fill in the blank. If you are not first solid and sound in the foundations of whole food nutrition, regular healthy movement, consistent quality sleep, stress management, and self-care, that is where you need to invest your time. Now, is this the most exciting area to focus on? Absolutely not. It is so much more exciting to go hop in a sauna, and it's so much more convenient to just throw back a supplement and call it a day. No doubt about it. But it is the boring, consistent pieces to your wellness puzzle that are going to make the greatest difference. And unfortunately, we just neglect all of that. We think we can bring in all of these higher tier strategies to health, and we're forgetting how a lack of a solid foundation means nothing can then be built on that, and then everything else isn't really useful because the body is compromised so foundationally that nothing then can be built upon it. So if I were to say this bluntly, stop wasting your money on supplements, on red light, on greens powders. Stop wasting your money on the next shiny thing that you see on social media. I think right now it's vibration plates. Okay, that's what I'm seeing nowadays. And focus on solidifying the foundations. That's it. That is it. That's boring. I get it. That seems pretty underwhelming, but that's the secret. That is the hack. That's the hack. And then everything else will then build upon that. Everything else will build upon that. But you need to commit to the foundations. You need to invest in the foundations for a prolonged period of time so that you're able to feel confident in those foundations. Your life will change as a result of that. I'm not saying that those things are not transformational to both your health and your life. They are. I am a living proof to that. I am a living testament to that. However, you have to be willing to be in the boring consistently and lean into those things consistently before you can invest in anything else that you think is going to move the needle farther. Because those are all complementary to what the foundations are. And ultimately, you will only get so far with bringing in all of these additional supports that are lovely but can be costly. And if you're not investing your time and your energy and your money into the foundations, you're missing a major piece of the puzzle, if not the majority of the puzzle. So stop ignoring the foundations, stop spending money frivolously on these areas that can bring value but are no match when they're up against a faulty foundation. I can say this all day long. At the end of the day, you can spend your money however you want to spend your money, and I respect that, but this is coming from somebody who has an understanding, who has expertise. And by now, if you've been listening to the podcast long enough, I hope you have some trust in me. Just know, start with the foundations and build from there. Okay. This next one is going to step on some toes, maybe a little bit, and I'm going to spend quite a bit of time here. So let's get into it. You are in your own way. You are in your own way. You're in your own way. That's it. That is it. You are in your own way. I said at the beginning of this episode, there is a time and place for self-compassion. There's a time and place for patience. There's a time and place for grace and self-forgiveness. Yes, no doubt about it. And I'm going to sound like a broken record throughout this episode because I want to be clear that I make that clear. Now, this is me trying to shy away from the hurting your feelings part because I'm not the type of person that wants to necessarily come out and hurt your feelings, right? I want to be sure that I am clear on the fact that there is an important balance component that comes into this. But for today's episode, we're talking about discipline. We're talking about focus. We're talking about tough love. And so, yes, time and place, my friends. In every other episode, you'll hear me saying time and place. You'll hear me saying grace, compassion, self-forgiveness, being patient with the process, meeting yourself where you are. Absolutely, that will always be the case. But for today, we're getting a little bit deeper into the reality of we're getting a little bit deeper into the reality of it that you are in your own way. No one is stopping you from your own health journey. No one is stopping you from that. And so the most important piece to this process is getting out of your way. Now, what do I mean by that? That can look like a number of different things. And one of the most valuable pieces to this whole equation is awareness and being aware of when you are getting in your own way. Because if you don't recognize it, if you do not recognize that you are getting in your own way, it will never be clear to you and you will never make a change. Now, usually this manifests as excuses. This manifests as avoidance. This manifests as resistance. Okay, what do I mean by this? I mean making excuses for why you can't do something, or continuing to tell yourself you're going to show up and then letting your own self down, or telling yourself you'll worry about it tomorrow, or it's too hard, or it takes too much time, or it's too inconvenient. All of these are ways that getting in your own way shows up. So now you can understand why we're going to spend a lot of this episode talking about this, because I have seen this in my own clients. I've seen this in my own self. I've seen this in friendships. And this is not me calling out any of those populations. Maybe I'm calling myself out a little bit here in years past, but it's more just to shed light on the humanness of it. And then it gives you an opportunity to say, wait, yeah, that's me. Yep, that's me. That's me. I've done that. That's me. That's me right now. That's me last week. That's me, whatever, right? And that is going to help you build awareness around your own resistance. I don't know what word I just used. That's going to help you build awareness. I think I said aroundness. I don't know what I said. I can't go back and listen to it. So it is what it is. You're going to be able to build awareness around your own self-sabotage as a result of listening to all these examples, because my guess is something in this conversation will resonate with you. So you're getting in your own way. How are we doing this? Excuses. Excuses. Okay. What is an excuse? An excuse is a way for us to evade the need to do something. Now, are there valid excuses? Absolutely, 110%, no doubt about it. There are reasons that will absolutely impede our ability to do something that's better for our health. For example, my car is currently snowed into my parking spot. I have to get it out at least within the next 4 hours so I can go teach my Pilates classes. And I don't have a shovel here. Don't have a shovel, so I'm going to have to figure that out. But excuses would look like, or rather, a valid excuse would look like, I cannot get to my workout this morning because my car is snowed in. Fair. Totally fair. It is when the excuses become chronic that it becomes a problem. Now, I like to tread lightly around this, but then again, I came into this episode saying I was going to hurt feelings, or I wasn't afraid to hurt feelings. This is what I would say. But I'm still going to tread lightly because it's not my goal to upset anyone. But when it comes to building our own awareness and really paying attention to how we're getting in our own way, we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves and take a really good look at what excuses we're giving ourselves that is preventing us from moving forward. Ultimately, that is the problem. That is what I'm here to help you do, is to stop getting in your own way, to stop impeding your own progress towards the goals that you have for yourself. That is ultimately what this is about. It's not about calling you out or making you feel a certain type of way. It's just so that you are aware of, wait a second, maybe I am making these excuses and maybe they aren't actually legitimate enough for me to stop meal prepping or to keep me from my workout. Or maybe this is something that I'm noticing has now been weeks that I've been avoiding my workouts, or months, or maybe years, whatever the case might be. I think it takes a lot of willingness and self-awareness and honesty with ourselves to say, yeah, I have been avoiding this. I'm a human being. I've been avoiding this for whatever reason. Sometimes it's much deeper than maybe what we recognize on the surface. And how can I start to pay closer attention to my tendency, to my vulnerability to make these excuses so that I can stop it? Like I said, the original example of there's snow behind my car, I don't have a shovel, I can't get to my workout, totally fair. And that's going to happen. If we let that be a reason that we give up entirely, that is obviously something that we also want to pay attention to. However, it's when these excuses become chronic, that is where we owe ourselves the accountability and the tough love to say, hey, I know that you're coming up with every excuse in the book to evade the need to do this thing. So what do I need to do in order to move the needle? What do I need to do in order to overcome this resistance, this barrier, so that I'm not continually staying in place, or I'm not making the progress that I want? And like I said, this can look like a lot of different excuses, right? This can look like I don't have time, work's too busy, I'm too tired, I didn't get to the grocery store, right? Like this can look like a number of different things that all, generally speaking, are pretty mild and could all very much be the reason why you're unable to do it. Maybe once, maybe twice in a week, maybe a couple times a year. But when it becomes something that you allow to be your rationale for not doing that thing, that's where you have to decide, I need to stop pulling this card because it's just hurting me and I'm sabotaging my progress as a result of it. Now, I think also to that point, what was my other point that I just had that now I'm forgetting? Excuses. Oh, it's a lot of mindset shift as well. I think we could have those excuses, right? And I think a lot of times we are limited in terms of time, or we are limited in terms of availability, or maybe we are feeling especially tired, or we're feeling like our body hurts or our body's sore, or whatever the case might be. And I think something that can also be really helpful is shifting the mindset, shifting the frame of the way we see it. By that, I mean essentially taking a different angle on how you view these behaviors, how you view these actions as not being fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth on your list, but instead making them first, second, third on your list. Because one might say, well, I have kids. One might say, I have work. One might say, I have X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, if you make proper nutrition, exercise, sleep, if you make all of those things primary importance, everything else in your life as a parent, as a worker, as a partner, whatever the case might be, will improve. And you will do better at those things. Those jobs, those roles will be fulfilled even better as a result of taking care of yourself along the way. Now, I want to preface this and place this disclaimer here that I understand that everyone's circumstances and situations are different. And so it's going to look differently on every single person, as far as you have one kid, you have no kids, you have 6 kids, or I have one job, I have no job, I have 8 jobs, right? So every person's going to be different. And so I never want to be insensitive to that consideration. But what it looks like through your lens, what it looks like through your current experiences, what can you do to move up better health on your list, whether it's through meal prepping or meal planning or movement or sleep, whatever the case might be. And then as a result, all of those other priorities will improve because you are a healthier person and you feel better. And that, I think, is key. So on the topic of excuses, I want to just shed light on how important it is for us to recognize how we as humans try to evade the things that we know we need to do. That is what that is. The resistance, the avoidance, the excuses is just a way for us to evade what we need to do in order to heal. Like I said before, this can actually be a much deeper rooted issue. This is coming from my background in mental health, where is it a worthiness wound? Is it that we're not, able to heal? Maybe we have a belief system that we can't heal. Maybe we grew up in an environment that shaped the way we saw healing, or maybe if we have some sort of trauma there that we are afraid to tackle, whether it's a relationship with food or a relationship with exercise. Maybe something as children or as young adults impacts our ability to move forward with this. There can be a lot, both surface level and much deeper here. But I think at the end of the day, if we're able to really pay attention to the excuses that we're providing for ourselves and be honest with ourselves about, yeah, that's actually me making an excuse, the quicker we are able to overcome those excuses and overcome our vulnerability to the excuses. If not, we will allow these excuses to continue to get in the driver's seat of our health, and we will never get better. We will never make changes. We will never heal. And you know how that ends, right? We don't stay in the same spot. If we let that inflammation, that, poor diet, that lack of movement, if we let all of that persist, it only compounds. It only becomes something much greater, and the issues continue to unfold. So excuses are tough because I think we can sit on this fine line of, well, it's kind of valid, or we convince ourselves that the excuse is worthy of keeping us from taking that next step in our health. But at the end of the day, if we allow excuses to continue to take control, we will never get to where we want to be. And maybe that's what you want. That's what you need to hear. I have worked with clients for years now around making lifestyle changes, and I have a ton of respect and sensitivity to the challenge that this can bring. But it's also my job to shed light on when I think there are excuses being made. It's my job to hold clients accountable to their changes, hold them accountable to their behaviors, to their protocols, to what's advised of them. And so while I am very conscious of being respectful and acknowledging how things come up and things don't always work out, and how can we troubleshoot and how can we prevent this from continuing to be an issue, I also have to draw serious attention to when there's resistance, when there's avoidance, when there is chronic excuses around the changes that they need to make in order to progress. Because at the end of the day, that is what I'm paid for. I'm paid to educate, I'm paid to empower, I'm paid to guide, but I'm also paid to call you out when you are serving me something that I think is fixable, or I think is just a way for you to resist, to avoid the change. So that might not always feel very good. And I'm very conscious about how I deliver that, very intentional about it. But in order for you to really understand how inhibitory it is on your progress or why this is happening, sometimes you need it reflected back to you. That is my job. I am a mirror to you. And then this way we can find an avenue that makes more sense, that works better, that allows you to meet yourself where you are, maybe a little bit more realistically. Maybe it's just the expectation is too high. There's a multitude of scenarios that can apply here, but at the end of the day, your excuses are getting in the way of making progress, and it's time that you call them out. Now, this concept of not having time or being too busy, everyone has the same amount of hours in the day. Like I said before, you might have children, you might have a few jobs, you might have lots of responsibilities, and I understand that. But if you really take a microscope and you look at your day and where you're spending your time, I am certain that you can find even small windows of time to roast some veggies, to get a 5-minute walk in, to set your alarm for the next day, whatever that might look like, in order for you to be more successful with your health goals. I think that is the most common thing that I hear is I don't have time. And I, once again, have to be very cautious and intentional about how I kind of reframe that, because I think every person's different. And obviously once I get to know certain clients and can kind of give them a little bit of feedback around that concept, it's easier for me to address it based on that person and based on what I'm understanding as far as their certain circumstances, but then also what that statement actually means. But at the end of the day, we invest our time in things that we find value in. So this is kind of my segue from excuses into this concept of I don't have time, which is still an excuse, but I would say one of the most common excuses that I hear. I don't have time is very valid in a number of ways. My one client says to me she works 12 hours Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And she says, I still try to get a workout in if I can. I still try to make it happen. And I said to her, please do not do that, especially based on her lab results. I said, if you cannot physically get yourself to a workout on those days that you are in a healthcare environment, you're working 12 hours, that is a ton of stress and a ton of expectation on your body. So give yourself permission to let those days be rest days, because you're already plenty active. Versus Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, she has workouts, she sticks to them. Great. I said, keep it the way it is. Do not force yourself into working out on those days, because that's a lot. Now, you invest in what you see value in. You invest your time, your money in what you see value in. And so at which point did we lose touch with or lose sight of the value in our health and the behaviors that we need to engage in order to invest in our health? So this concept of investing in what we find value in is applicable to every single human. What you find valuable is different from what I find valuable, and what the next person finds valuable is going to be different from the next guy's approach to this concept, right? Where what they find value in. But at the end of the day, while I might be coming from a biased place, I would argue that everyone should value their health. And unfortunately, this is a hard pill to swallow, but a lot of us don't value our health until we no longer have it. A lot of us reach rock bottom, and that's when we say, okay, now it's time to take measures to investing in my health. And I think this is two-pronged, right? There's two reasons why this is the case. It's because first and foremost, I think we as humans don't think in that worst case scenario mentality all the time, right? I want to say it's not something that we're definitely vulnerable to, but I think we have this idea of, and I know there's a term for it, but I don't know what the term is at this moment in time. That couldn't possibly happen to me. Or a lot of times we'll just deflect the thought of it because it's just not something we want to think about, which is fair. I think too, we don't realize how much control we have around our health. I think that is a byproduct of our culture, and keeping that information from us more or less, or not educating on that at all, or empowering us with the knowledge and the understanding that we actually have a lot of control around our health. And so it's not until we lose our health do we realize, oh, wait, I have to change something. I have to do something. And I think that in and of itself kind of detracts from finding value in our health until we're forced to find value in our health, if that makes sense, if you're following me here. And so at the end of the day, you're going to invest your time into what you find value. And so if that is not your health at this moment in time, then you're not going to invest time in it. And that's all fine, right? I obviously, like I said, I am coming from a biased place where this is my work. This is what I find is my passion, right? Like this is my work. This is my job. I am responsible for getting people excited about investing in their health and helping people invest in their health. But not every person feels that way. And so I want to challenge you with this concept around you invest your time in what you find value in, and start to think about what is it that you find value in, because whatever you invest your time in, that is what you value. That is what you value. And that's just the reality of being a human, of human nature. And so if you start to think about that in the lens of what we're talking about here, you can then start to understand, okay, why might I invest in X, Y, and Z and not in my health? Why is it that I don't find value in my health? Or what can I start doing to make that a priority? And that will hopefully help you bring clarity to the fact that, okay, I might invest my time in all of these arenas, which are equally as important, right? I'm not going to say that your family and your job and all that are not important, but why is it that your health is fourth, fifth, sixth on the list? And how might I be able to utilize my time more effectively so that can still be important, that can still be valuable to me? Because we know that health is important. And like, there's this quote that I'm sure you've heard that I think a lot of people hear is, you have hundreds and hundreds of problems, something along those lines. You have 100 problems, and then once you lose your health, you only have one problem. I butchered that, but that's essentially the gist. And I think that is so true. It's not until you lose your health do you realize, wow, that's important. Wow, what really matters outside of my health? So I encourage you to not let yourself get to that point. This is the tough love part. Don't let yourself get to that point where you have to be taught the value of health instead of just making it valuable, making it important. So, kind of an overview of what we just went through. Excuses. So incredibly common. We can always find a reason why we don't want to do something. We can always find a reason to resist, to avoid what we know we need to do. And so I encourage you to be willing to see your excuses as they are, excuses, and move past them. Work through those mental blocks, work through the mindset shifts that you need to change in order to make your health behaviors more routine, more habitual. Secondly, I don't have time. We all have time. We just choose to use it in different ways. And that kind of segues into my next comment of, we invest our time in what we find valuable. And so we have to determine, what are the things that I invest my time in? And are there areas that I'm investing my time in that I could maybe afford to be invested into my health? Like I said, small pockets of time here and there. That, 30 minutes as you're watching a show, can you devote to something a little bit more health providing, right? Health health supportive, focusing on where am I and where am I investing my time? Where am I allotting my time? And how might I be able to take that time and put it in an area that's a little bit more health forward for the sake of my health? Next, a hard truth. A hard truth is, in order to have good health, you have to be willing to change. Now, this kind of goes along with everything that I've been saying, but this topic, this concept is so important. And the reason I say this is because I had to do it myself. I had to recognize that the lifestyle that I was living, the lifestyle I was leading, was number one, very much standard American lifestyle. Okay, so that was the first acknowledgement. And the second acknowledgement was, in order for me to actually feel better, in order for me to actually support my mind and my body, I have to be willing to change a multitude of areas in my life and sustain those areas in order to create change. And the hardest part about it is the fact that we are forced to change everything about how we as Americans have been told is normal to live. We have to be consistent with exercise. We have to eat the foods that are not super accessible and not super affordable to us. We have to be willing to sleep, even though everything in our culture tells us that we can sleep when we're dead, or we should be hustling, we should be doing more. We need to detach from blue light, from screens, from artificial lighting, more than we would maybe like to, or more than the world allows us to. Okay? We need to manage stress and set boundaries. We need to avoid toxins and support our livers and heal our guts and do all the things. Now, I'm obviously trying to be a little bit over exaggerating for the effect, for the drama, if you will. But it's hard to be healthy. It is hard to be healthy, I will say it. And it's only hard because of where we live. Now, if you're a listener from somewhere else in the world, I would be so curious to hear your take on this. But in America, it is hard to be healthy. No one can deny that. Now, don't get me wrong. We are so much farther along than where we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. No doubt in my mind. We are so much farther along. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm only imagining we'll continue in that direction. But I always say this, there's healthy and there's healthy. And the way we as Americans perceive healthy is different and incorrect in comparison to how we actually need to be healthy. And I mean that in a sense of diet culture, our healthcare system, different lifestyle approaches, or how we should be moving our bodies, or approaches to certain hormonal issues, right? So approaches to different GI issues, right? How we perceive health, how we approach health is not health. It's not health. Health is preventative care. Health is remaining healthy in mind and body, sustaining health, not a reactive response to something that's already developed, or being on medications for the entirety of our lives and just living on medication, right? And functioning or just getting by the help of medication. That's not health. And our healthcare system tries to pawn it off to us as being healthy, and that's just not it. And so in order for us to really change our lives, in order for us to really change our health, it does truly require a complete rewiring of our understanding of health. And that takes time. You don't know until you know. I say this all the time, especially when I'm talking to someone who is kind of in the same, on the same wavelength, if you will. And it's like, you don't know until you know. And then once you know, you can't unknow it. And that is just how our whole body's connected, how all systems are related, how whole foods is the way. There's no crazy diet that's necessary for us to be healthy humans. Whole foods, moving our body regularly, getting enough sleep. And I understand, I just said kind of two contradicting things. I said, healthy is hard. And then also I said before, healthy is pretty simple, right? You just need those foundations. But we live in a culture where there's so much dissonance to it, right? Where doing all those things that are simple are very expensive and very inaccessible, and definitely not what's the norm, and definitely not what is the easiest road to travel. And so while it's extremely simple, it's also incredibly complex just based on the world in which we live, the country in which we live, in terms of how health is delivered, how health is marketed. And so it's very complex in that way, because it is so simple, but it is so hard because we are just inundated with everything that disconnects us from health. And it requires us to really change our lifestyle, our literal way of life, in order to actually make a difference in our health. So this is my encouragement for you. And I guess this is the tough love, is you have to be willing to change your life, both mind and in body, in order to heal. You cannot heal in the environment that made you sick. So in order to change your health and to restore balance and function in your health, you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to change your life. And that, I think, is one of the hard truths that I have conversations with my clients after coming off of their protocol. It's not 90 days of a protocol and then that's it, and you go back to the way you were living. You don't want to go back to the way that you were living, because the way you were living got you to where you are now. So there does require a complete shift in your way of thought around how you've been living your life, so that you can sustain those changes and maintenance of those changes over the course of the next year, 5 years, 10 years, years and years and years down the line. So that is a hard truth. And that might hurt some feelings. I'm never in a position to portray this idea that health is inaccessible and unattainable, because I don't believe that. But what I do believe is it does require your whole body commitment and investment in order to actually create sustainable change. It can't just be something that you half-ass, that you think you're going to do for a couple weeks and then it's going to be better. You have to be willing to commit. And this is something that I have to have conversations with clients about. As I said originally, or as I said throughout the episode, my job is to hold you accountable. And so if you're only putting in 50%, if you're only committing to a percentage of what I'm asking of you, you have to expect that that output is going to reflect that. And so the change has to be committed to. You have to be willing to commit to the process. And I've seen clients on both ends of the spectrum. I've seen clients on one end of the spectrum where they're committed, absolutely committed, no questions, no oscillation, is that a word? Oscillating from the plan, full investment. And then I've also seen clients, of course, over the spectrum in terms of different levels of commitment. And I almost think about, moving forward when it comes to screening clients, are they ready? Are they committed to this change? And if they're not, it's not because you are not worthy of the change. It's not because you don't deserve it, right? It's not because you can't possibly make the change at some point in time, but you have to want it enough to commit to the change. You have to want it enough to invest in the process. And not everyone's there yet. And this kind of ties back to, are you at rock bottom? Some people come to me and say, I will do whatever you say. I am a 10 out of 10 committed. Sign me up. What do I have to do? Other people, just not the same. And that's okay. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Maybe that's when you'll be ready. But if you're not ready, that's going to show in your commitment and your investment. And it requires a ton of willingness to commit and a willingness to change in order to see the output, the outcome that you want. Hard stop. That's the truth of the matter. So important. There's a lot of other areas around this topic that I could share on. I think that these are the ones that come to mind the most, around how we get in our own ways, how we sabotage, how we forget how important our mindset is around making these changes, how our country prevents us from creating healthy lives, how much harder it is for us as Americans to make better choices. And so I really want to shed light on all of this, just because these are all the thoughts that I that I've navigated. But then also, these are things I come in contact with my clients. And as someone who is responsible for holding them accountable and getting them where they want to be, these are conversations that I have to have with them. These are hard truths that I have to navigate with them. And so at the end of the day, it's all because I want them to grow. It's all because I want them to see it as a cast to their betterment, right? To their ability to move forward and overcome these barriers. But you have to be willing to say, yes, there are going to be challenges. It's going to be hard. And there's going to be things that make me uncomfortable. And I'm willing to do it anyway for the person that I want to be and how I want to feel. So I'm certain that I'm going to log off of this episode, and I'm going to think of so many other things that I could add here. This was really just, if you couldn't tell, it's just kind of me just riffing is what they call it, I guess. Just kind of going for it. But I hope that some of this maybe resonated. I hope that there was no offense taken to it at all. I always want to be sure that I'm very sensitive to the varying factors that make us all different, the limitations that we maybe can't overcome, the responsibilities that we have that make it harder for us to invest in our health. And then, ultimately, always, as I said throughout the episode, showing ourselves grace and patience and self-compassion and, self-respect in the ebbs and the flows of the journey, because that's inevitable. But at the same time, there comes a point in time where discipline is necessary. There comes a point in time where, holding ourselves accountable, that self-accountability is really important. There comes a time where we have to kind of call ourselves out for the things that we're not doing that we need to do in order to get to where we want to be. And that is really the hardest obstacle. No one is holding you back from this more than you. Right. And so that's why all of this really centers around you. It centers around what's going on with you, because it's not anyone else that's holding you back. It's your own limitations, right? It's your own resistance. But in a way, that is where we have almost the upper hand, because it's not like somebody's keeping you from doing these things that makes it hard to control what they're doing. This is all you. So we can take responsibility and be like, yeah, wait a second, I am totally responsible for this. I am the reason that I'm making excuses, that I'm, avoiding this, that I'm not acknowledging the need for this. And you can also say, well, today's the day I stopped doing that. Today's the day I change that, because I know I need to, because I know my health is valuable, because I know I don't want to get to rock bottom and then decide that's when I make a change in my health, as opposed to, what I can do now to intervene so it doesn't get to that point. Okay. You have the power. You have the capability to change. You are your best friend in this. You are your best cheerleader in this, your best accountability partner in this, but you can also be your own worst enemy. So I encourage you, take the time, self-evaluate, swallow some of these pills, because they're a little hard to swallow, and just know that all of this is meant for your betterment, for your progression, to propel you in the direction that you want to go, to take care of your health, take care of yourself. And as always, I'm here if you need support. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And until next time, be well.